Ngozi lay on the rusted hospital bed, staring at her newborn's face. The wick bulb flickered, painting shadows across the room. Outside, Enugu's night buzzed with distant traffic and generator hums. The nurse had left her alone, whispering something about signing papers. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her thumb. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "My son," she whispered, "the world is too hard for us." Moments later, a woman in a fine lace wrapper entered, her perfume heavy with power. "I can give you a better life," she said softly. "Money. Shelter. Peace." She placed an envelope thick with cash on the table. Ngozi stared at it, her mind spinning. Poverty had eaten her pride long ago. With trembling hands, she signed the paper. The woman smiled and carried the baby away. The door closed. Ngozi's wail echoed through the ward like a curse unanswered. The morning sun found Ngozi still on the bed, her eyes swollen from crying. The nurse came back and spoke gently, but her words floated away like smoke. Ngozi held the baby blanket close to her chest, breathing in the scent. The money lay beside her, heavy and cold like a stone. She should have felt relief, but instead, a strange emptiness spread through her. When she left the hospital, she walked through the noisy city streets barefoot. Cars honked. People shouted. Nobody knew her pain. She stopped by a church gate and knelt, begging God for forgiveness. But guilt had already buried itself inside her. Days turned to weeks. She moved from house to house, washing clothes, cooking for strangers, surviving on tears and small wages. Each night, she dreamed of a child calling Mama in the dark and waking up to silence. Years passed like dust swept by harmattan winds. Ngozi's beauty faded, replaced by wrinkles of sorrow. She had no family, no friend, just memories and hunger. Yet deep in her heart, a quiet hope lived, that someday, somewhere, she would see her son again. One morning, while walking along Ogui Road looking for work, she overheard two women talking. "They say Madame Oge is looking for a new maid," one said. "Her house is like a palace." Ngozi's heart leapt. Maybe this was her chance. She followed the address and stood before a large mansion with tall white walls and iron gates. A security man eyed her with suspicion, but she begged until he let her in. Madame Oge, a graceful woman with gold earrings, studied Ngozi from head to toe. "Can you cook?" she asked. "Yes, Ma," Ngozi replied. "Then start today," Madame Oge said. "We treat loyal workers like family." Ngozi worked hard in the big house. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached, ironed clothes, and cooked for visitors she would never meet. Every corner of the mansion whispered wealth. Still, she felt grateful. At least she had a roof and food. Then one evening, she saw him, Chidi, Madame Oge's only son. He had just returned from abroad, tall and handsome, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He greeted every worker warmly. But when Ngozi looked at him, her chest tightened. Something about his eyes, something soft, familiar, shook her deeply. As days went by, Chidi often stopped to talk with her. "Mama Ngozi," he would say, "your jollof rice tastes like home." Each time, her throat burned with unspoken truth. She began to wonder, could this be her son? But how? Still, her spirit whispered the same answer every night: blood knows blood. One rainy morning, Ngozi was dusting Chidi's room when her rag brushed against a drawer left slightly open. Out of habit, she closed it, but something caught her eye, an old, folded paper with a hospital stamp. She froze. Her hands shook as she opened it. The words danced before her eyes: St. Mary's Hospital, Enugu, male child, adoption date, 1998. Her heart thumped like a drum. The date. The name of the hospital. The signature at the bottom, it was hers. She fell to her knees, clutching the paper, whispering through tears, my son, my son." Memories flooded her mind, the night, the money, the woman's smile. She had sold this child, and fate had brought her under his roof. When she heard footsteps, she quickly hid the paper back and wiped her face. Her secret, once buried, had risen again, and now it burned her soul. That night, Ngozi couldn't sleep. She sat by her small window in the servants' quarters, staring at the moon. The voices of the past filled her ears, her baby's cry, the woman's offer, her own trembling voice saying yes. She pressed her hands over her chest, whispering prayers for forgiveness. But guilt soon turned to envy. Chidi had everything: wealth, love, a mother who dressed in gold and pearls. Madame Oge called him my son and kissed his forehead proudly. Ngozi watched them from afar, her heart breaking. If I hadn't sold him, she muttered bitterly, that love would be mine. The thought grew into anger, then poison. In her mind, Madame Oge became the thief of her destiny. By dawn, Ngozi had made a decision. She would take back what life stole from her, even if it meant crossing a line she could never return from. Ngozi began to plan. She moved quietly, pretending to serve while watching Madame Oge's every habit. The woman loved her evening tea, no sugar, light milk, just before bed. Ngozi's mind darkened with wicked thoughts she didn't recognize as her own. One afternoon, she went to a small market and bought a powder from an old herbal seller. Just a drop, the woman said, her eyes sharp. It will silence whoever you wish. Ngozi hid the small packet inside her wrapper and walked home trembling. At night, as she stirred the tea, her hands shook. I am not evil, she whispered. I just want my son back. But as she carried the tray toward Madame Oge's room, tears blinded her. Each step echoed like thunder in her ears. The tea's sweet smell filled the hall, mixed with the bitter scent of fate. In the dim light of Madame Oge's bedroom, Ngozi placed the cup on the table. Here is your tea, ma, she said softly, forcing a smile. Madame Oge nodded gratefully, her eyes tired from a long day. But as Ngozi turned to leave, her trembling hand slipped. The cup tilted, spilling drops on her wrist. Without thinking, she licked it quickly, fearful of being scolded for wasting. A sharp taste burned her tongue. Panic seized her chest. Within minutes, her throat tightened. She staggered, gasping, clutching her neck. Madame Oge rushed to her side. Ngozi. What's wrong? Chidi ran in, alarmed by the noise. He knelt beside her as she coughed violently. Tears streamed down her face. My son, she rasped, her voice breaking. Forgive me. I sold you. I wanted to make it right. The room fell silent. Her eyes glazed. The poison had chosen its victim. Chidi froze, his mind spinning. What did she say? Madame Oge whispered, shaking. The truth hit him like lightning. This woman, his maid, was his real mother. His body trembled as he held her lifeless hand. Memories of her kindness, her quiet smiles, her stories by the kitchen fire, all flashed before him. Why didn't you tell me? He cried. But it was too late. The walls seemed to close in, heavy with secrets. Madame Oge wept silently. She suffered, she murmured. She must have lived with this pain all her life. The next morning, they buried Ngozi behind the house near the mango tree. Chidi placed fresh flowers there and whispered, You gave me life twice, once in birth, once in truth. The wind blew softly, carrying her spirit into the light. For the first time, she rested in peace. After Ngozi's death, silence settled in the mansion. Chidi often visited her grave, talking as if she could hear him. I forgive you, Mama, he would say. Your love was never lost. Madame Oge changed too. She began to support orphan mothers, building shelters for women in pain. No woman should ever sell her child to survive, she told the press one day, tears shining in her eyes. At night, Chidi sometimes dreamed of two women, one in white lace, one in a faded wrapper, standing side by side, smiling at him beneath a glowing sky. And in those dreams, he felt peace. Karma had done its work, not in cruelty, but in justice. Love, though broken, had found its way home. The mansion stood quiet, bathed in golden light. And somewhere in the wind, Ngozi's voice whispered. My son. I am finally free.